Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you about a sentence that quietly ruins more dreams than failure ever could. It's a sentence so small and so common that most people don't even notice when they say it. It sounds harmless. It sounds realistic. It even sounds responsible. And that sentence is, "That's too much for someone like me." Maybe you've whispered it to yourself when you saw someone living a life you secretly wanted. Maybe you felt it when an opportunity appeared and your first instinct was to step back instead of forward. That sentence feels safe, but it builds invisible walls around your life. I want you to imagine a person standing in front of a wide open field. There are no fences. No locked gates. Nothing physically stopping them from walking forward. But in their mind, there is a giant wall. They believe it's there so strongly that they never even try to cross. They spend their whole life pacing inside a small circle, convinced that outside that circle is not meant for them. That's what happens when you decide something is too much for someone like you. The limit becomes real, not because it exists in the world, but because it exists in your belief. Most limits we carry are inherited. They come from past experiences, from comments people made when we were younger, from moments when we tried and didn't succeed. Each disappointment adds a tiny brick to a wall. Over time, that wall looks permanent. You start labeling yourself. You say you're not smart enough, not talented enough, not confident enough. And once you accept those labels, you stop testing them. You treat them as facts instead of guesses. The strange thing about human potential is that it rarely announces itself in advance. You don't feel ready before you grow. Growth is messy and uncomfortable. When you watch someone who has achieved something impressive, you're seeing the polished result of a long period where they felt unsure and unqualified. But your mind edits that part out. It tells you they were different from the start. It tells you they had something you don't. That story protects you from the risk of trying, because if they were born different, then you're excused from competing. But what if that story is wrong? What if the distance between where you are and where you want to be is not a fixed barrier, but a series of small steps you haven't taken yet? Think about a time when you learned a new skill. At the beginning, everything felt awkward. Your movements were clumsy. Your progress was slow. If someone had judged your future ability based only on those first attempts, they would have underestimated you completely. Yet with repetition and patience, what once felt impossible became familiar. The phrase, "someone like me," is especially dangerous because it freezes your identity. It turns a temporary state into a permanent definition. When you say something is too much for someone like you, you're assuming you will always be the same person you are today. You're ignoring your capacity to adapt. Humans are built to change. Your brain rewires itself when you practice. Your confidence expands when you survive challenges. Your tolerance for discomfort grows when you face it instead of avoiding it. There is a quiet experiment you can run in your own life. The next time you catch yourself thinking that something is too much, pause and add 3 words to the end of the sentence. Say, "That's too much for someone like me right now." Those last 2 words create space. They transform a verdict into a moment. Right now is temporary. It suggests movement. It invites the possibility that with effort and time, the statement could become outdated. People often wait for permission to aim higher. They want proof that they deserve to try. But permission rarely arrives as a clear signal. It arrives disguised as curiosity, as a small voice asking, what if you applied for that position? What if you shared your ideas? What if you trained for that goal? Curiosity is not random. It's a hint from your deeper self that there is unexplored territory within you. Fear will always accompany expansion. When you step beyond your familiar circle, your mind interprets uncertainty as danger. It produces reasons to retreat. It lists your past mistakes. It predicts embarrassment. But fear is not a reliable measure of your limits. It is a natural response to growth. If you only move when you feel completely safe, your world will shrink to the size of your comfort zone. Consider how many skills you now perform automatically that once intimidated you. There was a time when even simple tasks required intense concentration. Through repetition, your brain built pathways that made those tasks easier. The same process applies to bigger ambitions. The difference is that larger goals require sustained commitment. They ask you to tolerate being a beginner for longer. Many people quit not because they lack ability, but because they misinterpret the discomfort of learning as evidence of incapability. There is also a social dimension to perceived limits. We constantly compare ourselves to others. Social comparison can inspire, but it can also distort reality. You see the highlight reels of other people's journeys and compare them to your behind-the-scenes struggles. This creates the illusion that you are uniquely unprepared. In truth, everyone is navigating uncertainty. The people who progress are not the ones without doubt, but the ones who act despite it. Imagine two individuals with equal potential. One repeatedly tells themselves that opportunities are too big for them. The other treats each opportunity as a chance to gather information. When they fail, they analyze what happened and adjust. Over time, their paths diverge dramatically. The first person accumulates evidence that reinforces their small self-image. The second accumulates skills and resilience. The difference begins with a belief about what is possible. Your identity is not a fixed object. It is a story you continuously update. Every action you take is a sentence in that story. When you attempt something challenging, you are editing the narrative of who you are. Even if the outcome is imperfect, the act of trying expands your self-concept. You start seeing yourself as someone who engages with difficulty rather than avoids it. It's important to understand that questioning your limits does not mean ignoring reality. It means testing assumptions. There will be constraints in your life. Time, resources, and circumstances matter. But within those constraints lies a wide range of choices. The danger is in assuming the range is narrower than it truly is. When you test your boundaries thoughtfully, you discover areas where growth is available. Progress often hides in incremental change. Dramatic transformations are rare and usually built on a foundation of small, consistent actions. If a goal feels overwhelming, reduce it to a step that feels manageable. Then take that step repeatedly. Each repetition is a vote in favor of a new identity. You are proving to yourself that you can operate beyond your previous limits. There is a powerful shift that happens when you replace the question, "Can I do this?" with, "How can I learn to do this?" The first question is binary. It invites a yes or no answer. The second question is creative. It assumes that learning is possible and focuses your attention on the process. This shift moves you from judgment to exploration. Mistakes are often treated as verdicts on your worth. In reality, they are data. They reveal which strategies work and which do not. When you detach your self-esteem from immediate outcomes, you gain the freedom to experiment. Experimentation is essential for discovering your true capacity. If you only engage in activities where success is guaranteed, you will never encounter the edges of your potential. There is also value in surrounding yourself with people who challenge your assumptions. When you spend time with individuals who are striving for growth, their mindset influences yours. You begin to normalize ambition. Goals that once seemed distant start to feel attainable. Community acts as a mirror, reflecting versions of yourself you might not have imagined alone. At some point, you may realize that the phrase, "too much for someone like me," was never a description of reality. It was a protective mechanism. It shielded you from disappointment by keeping your aspirations small. But protection comes with a cost. It limits the richness of your experiences. When you choose to question that phrase, you are choosing expansion over safety. Expansion does not guarantee immediate success. It guarantees engagement with life. It means you are actively participating in your own development. Each attempt, each adjustment, and each lesson contributes to a deeper understanding of what you can become. Over time, the circle you once paced inside grows wider. The invisible wall recedes. There will still be moments when doubt resurfaces. That is part of the human experience. The goal is not to eliminate doubt, but to develop a relationship with it that allows movement. When doubt appears, acknowledge it without surrendering to it. Treat it as a signal to prepare more carefully, not as a command to stop. Imagine looking back years from now and seeing a pattern of decisions driven by curiosity instead of fear. Imagine recognizing that many of the limits you once accepted were provisional. They were starting points, not endpoints. That perspective is available to you, but it requires a willingness to act in the presence of uncertainty. Every time you challenge the idea of what is too much for you, you participate in a quiet revolution within yourself. You rewrite expectations. You expand possibilities. You demonstrate that identity is dynamic. The person you are becoming is shaped by the risks you are willing to take and the persistence you bring to your efforts. So the next time that familiar sentence forms in your mind, pause before you accept it. Ask yourself what evidence supports it and what evidence contradicts it. Consider the skills you could develop, the help you could seek, and the strategies you could try. View the situation as an experiment rather than a verdict. Your life is not defined by the limits you inherit, but by the limits you question. Growth begins at the edge of your comfort zone and extends as far as your curiosity carries you. When you step into that space, you may discover abilities that were waiting for an invitation to emerge. And maybe the most important realization is this. The phrase, "someone like me," is not a cage unless you let it be. You are not a static category. You are a process. You are a collection of habits, choices, and experiences that can evolve. When you honor that evolution, you open yourself to a future that is larger and more flexible than your current imagination. As you move forward from this moment, carry a sense of gentle skepticism toward your own limitations. Treat them as hypotheses to be tested, not truths to be obeyed. Allow yourself to attempt things that stretch your sense of identity. With each effort, you gather evidence that informs a more accurate and empowering story about who you are. That story is still being written. It is shaped by the questions you ask, the challenges you accept, and the persistence you cultivate. When you replace "that's too much for someone like me" with "let me see how far I can go," you align yourself with the fundamental human capacity to grow. And in that alignment, you may find that the limits you once feared were not barriers at all, but invitations to discover a version of yourself you had not yet met.